Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 44 of Stat Check. This episode is titled Blood Yahtzee because some things happened when we named the episode around World Eaters. Unfortunately, since then, things have come to light that annoyed me more than Blood Yahtzee. So, I would rather we called it Strands of Heat or something like that, but we can save that for next week.
That's next week's episode title. You're ruining next week's episode title already.
I need to turn you down.
Oh, no. Oh, shit.
No, it's just my computer's volume.
Okay.
Anyway, hello everybody. I am Ennis, and I am joined by Nathan. No Anthony this week as of yet. His internet is apparently having some stability issues. We may have him joining us at some point later on in the stream, but for now it is just myself and Nathan. Nathan, let's start with you. How's your last week or so been? Or were you on? You weren't on last week, were you?
I wasn't on last week. I guess I can talk about 2 weeks.
How's your last fortnight been?
Very busy with work, but otherwise good. I am tooling around with a pure / demons list for RTT in a couple weeks, and I played a practice game against orcs with it. Although the orcs were also memeing, and it was like 30 flash gets in trucks.
Did you play Seth?
I did play Seth, as a matter of fact. So I played friend of the show, Seth Oster of Signals from the Frontline fame. And he just was like, I want to play this meme list. And I was like, well, this will be the first time I've ever played this /
Jeremy's not on the show, so nobody pinged that the show is live in Discord. Give me 1 second.
You do that. This is what happens when several adults decide not to be on it and in an evening, basically. Is nobody gets pinged and nobody knows when anything is going to happen.
Nobody knows what is going on at all, ever.
No. But yeah, so I played a pure / demons list that Tim Pinney helped me make, and then told me how to run, and then I ran it at Seth, and it managed to win. Turns out that Shalaxi is real good at just murdering random nonsense in melee combat. Who knew? And that being able to warp locus in keepers is also very good.
What level of degeneracy is a Shalaxi and more keepers list?
So the list is Shalaxi, another Keeper of Secrets with the +2 to charges enhancement. So out of a 6-inch charge, it's like a 4-inch charge out of Deep Strike, or you can just do whatever. And then it's 2 units of Fiends, 50 Demonettes, and a Chariot to hold the back objective, 2 Infernal Enrapturesses, which are the Harps, and 1 Herald.
Those hearts are also warp focuses, by the way, for anybody at home who is worried that just Shalaxi might die too easily.
Yes. Well, fortunately, the Herald is just a tiny-ass infantry character, and she ran into the middle with a 10-mana Demonettes and just summoned Shalaxi into the center of the field. And then it turns out that Grots have really low leadership, and if they're right next to the border of a deployment zone, you can drop a 10-mana Demonettes 4 inches away from them. Just, demon things.
Sure.
And then they charge in, and then suddenly Grots go from like 1s and 2s on their failed leadership test attrition to 1s, 2s, and 3s, and they just all run away.
You can make it 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s if they're near Bellicor.
Or if they're under half strength, then they're 1s.
If under half strength, they'd be 1s to 5s.
Yeah, excellent. They just always run at that point. And to be fair, at that point, you probably would want to run. But Shalaxi killed a war boss, 2 trucks, Badrock, like 8 flash gets by herself. Mostly because -1 to wound and -1 to hit in melee combat is real funny. Suddenly, nobody is hurting her at all.
I heard you also won your local league with Iron Hands.
I did. I played the 1,000 points phase of our competitive league with a list that Innes gave me, because I was like, what do I play? And Innes was like, here's 1,000 points of terrible things to do to your locals. And I went 6-0 from the 6 different rounds of the first phase and won the first phase of the league locally. And I'm playing Iron Hands again for phase 2. Again with Innes's list, because I have no shame and I will net list. I don't care.
There's prizes for them Crusade leagues in Nathan's parts.
No, this is a comp league, so people are in theory also playing competitive 40k with me.
That is a load bearing in theory.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are a lot of new players join these leagues, and there are a lot of people trying out new armies because it starts at 1,000 points. So I just brought like the best 1,000 points, and I just kind of nuked people off the table, which was perhaps rude of me. You know,
Nah, it's skill issue, mate. They should have just played around it.
with a list designed to buy one of the best players in the world for me. Obviously, I had no advantages.
Nah, no need. As for myself, fairly quiet week for me. I ran a major and played in a major with White Scars, which was really weird. Running a major is a new experience for me. I've run big events, so I've run a big team event before, but nothing quite like this one singles, and it went completely smoothly. So massive thanks to everybody who was there. It was a super experience. I managed to go 4-0-1 with 20 White Scars, Terminators, and Gulliman. The list was terrible, just straight up awful, but a lot of people don't have a game plan when you say, okay, I'm going to punch you in the face really fast. Can you recover? And when people, don't know what White Scars do, then they underestimate that. The answer is not a lot, which was quite fun. Gulliman got to do some cool things, was the best shooting unit in my army, which is always incredible. And you're like, okay, so this is my shooting phase. I'm going to fire this multi-melta and Gulliman and a crack grenade. And then they'll lose like 3 models to Gulliman, and they'll be like, oh my God, your shooting phase was great. You told me you didn't shoot. I'm like, buddy, please.
I threw 1 crack grenade, and then Gilliman used his like rapid fire gun or whatever to fire.
It's when Gulliman like turn 1 in my game 1 against Space Wolves, like picked up 3 Wolf Guard.
So that's like, not how anything is supposed to work.
3 shots, 3 hits, 3 wounds, 3 failed 4-ups. What if you just lost, half the squad to Gulliman for no reason? It was great. And then the Landspeeder Storm killed 2 Wolfen.
Oh God.
I was just like, this is making this a lot easier for me. Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, so I ended up losing I ended up drawing in game 5 to Fraser on his demons. It turns out not a lot of answers for Scarbrand and a Faith Cap Bloodthirster and White Scars besides charge it, and that's unreliable at best. So yeah, overall great time. Brian managed to pick up his first Scottish event win ever with his Hail of Doom Eldar. So massive thanks to friend of the show Brian for sticking it out for the full 6 rounds. Nathan froze for a second, and I was really worried I was going to be solo showing, which was just not happening. Nobody on the planet needs a solo in this show.
You could just talk at my picture; it'd be fine.
I could. You're right. I would rather not. But yeah, no, that's mostly been my week. I've got a little RTT this weekend, so I'm painting up some Tyranids for that because it's going to be my last event of 9th edition, I think. Where I will be playing a Behemoth Tyranids list because that's what my Tyranids are painted as. They're painted as Behemoth. So I was like, well, I'm just going to play Behemoth. So I've crammed in a bunch of stuff that I don't think is very good. And then I fit it around the mold of, what if I just have the 2 Walkrunts that maybe do damage if they ever get there? What's the secondary game plan? So we're going with that. I've got 15 Gene Stealers. It's going to be really weird.
Gene Stealers in a regular Tyranids list.
3x5 Gene Stealers. Yeah, man. I am trying. It's going to be great.
I heard the word Gene Stealers outside of a Colts list and was very confused.
Yeah, my list is like, I have no Zone Thropes, no Venom Thropes. I've got a Maliceptor, 2 Hive Tyrants, 2 Carnifex.
Just like a freaking sprinkling, a potpourri.
I basically went through, I'm going to try and use as much of my like old metal stuff as possible. So I've got my Forge World Hive Tyrant, my Metal Hive Tyrant, 3 Metal Tyrant Guard. I've then got the Parasite with 3 Forge World with some Forge World Rippers to spawn. I've got 10 Metal Gargoyles to run. I love
that somehow the youngest person of this podcast has miniatures older than he is that he's going to play.
I'm going to have 5 of the OG Tyranid Gene Stealers, 5 of the like current ones, and 5 of the Space Hulk ones for squad markings. It's going to be great.
Those Forge World Rippers are the best, though. The like regular plastic ones are kind of garbage comparatively. The Forge World ones are so nice.
Yeah, they are very nice models. I'm looking forward to seeing like the new Rippers from Leviathan and stuff like that. But I don't know if I'll be able to bring myself to use them over the Forge World ones. I have 6 of them. They are lovely, lovely models. I hope they're terrible, so I don't have to finish painting the other 4. But
we have like that one really blurry photo that somebody like enhanced 5 times of the new Rippers.
Yeah.
Because they're like hiding in the back of a photo with some gaunts.
I think we got a full picture of them when they actually previewed the box, didn't they?
I don't think so.
I'm like 23% sure.
Maybe. I guess we can talk about stats then. It's a really quiet week, so it's really going to be funny because me and Innes will probably just hype on some 10th previews.
Yeah, we're just going to talk. So
this
this week, guys, we're going to do some general talk about some 10th previews after you do the Stats League, and then we're probably just going to do like 40 minutes of show questions, round out in the clean hour or clean 90 minutes as usual.
I have a hilarious amount of math to talk about too that Cliff did, so that's going to be fun.
You know, we've just seen the Rippers. I'm pretty sure.
All right. Well, for this week, while Innes looks for that image of a
they're just in the promo pictures. Chill out, guys.
Were they? Oh, yeah. Damn! I don't remember seeing them.
There's one Ripper base at the top right corner. He's very.
I guess I missed it.
He's like right next to the Venom Crawler thing. So
the Venom Crawler thing is my favorite. It's definitely a Tyranid Swarm ate a Venom Crawler and was like, you know what? Why not? And threw out the Psychophage or whatever it's called.
Your cat is just going to town.
Yeah, he does that. People said they wanted more cat talk, or cat podcast or something like that.
Let's do the stats. Let's just get on. Let's do it before we degenerate.
So it was a really quiet weekend. There were only 6 events this weekend. So I'm just going to kind of blaze through these essentially because there's not really a lot to talk about. In first place, just because I think it's funny to mention, is White Scars. With a 90% win rate. Because they won 4 games and drew 1. And that counts as a half win. So it's a 90% win rate. There was only 1 player for them this weekend. And they have an overrep of 12.88 because they top forward. So congratulations to Innes with his overrep of almost 13 because he by himself top 4 as the only White Scars player for the weekend.
What's the like the Arcs of Omen win rate for White Scars?
I actually have it up. I can pull it up. Give me 2 seconds while I grab the dashboard. Wee. White Scars, 49%.
49%. It's quite nice.
Yep. Yes, Innes was in like the top 4, so he qualifies for that. So you got a 13 overrep and a broke the faction by himself. Congratulations, Innes.
Everybody, just Terminators. They're good. It's a cool day issue.
Yep. And just because this weekend had so little participation from people, there's like 3 under 10 number of player factions at the top, and we don't hit one over 10 until 4th place. The next 2 are Gene Stealer Cult, which had 4 players and a 61% win rate, and a single top 4 for a 3.2 overrep.
3 of them won my event, and none of them top 4. So it was the other guy.
Yeah. And then Death Guard, which had 6 players and a top 4 and a 2.15 overrep. Neither of those numbers are probably representative. Although the Stealer Cult might kind of be a little bit representative of.
Yeah, that's what we just actually are. It's just a small, quiet week, right?
Yeah. And then we finally get into the actual meaningful statistics for the week.
Oh, you mean the first place one wasn't meaningful? I'm hurt.
No.
I even color coded.
It really wasn't. Chaos Demons are the number 1 faction with over 10 people playing it this weekend. They were 17 Demons players for a 5.5% meta representation. They had a win rate of, wow, I just got myself very confused in my own table. Good job, Nathan. A 60.6% win rate, 2 event wins, 3 top 4s, 6 top 10s, and an overall overrep of 2.27, which means Chaos Demons real good. I know people definitely didn't ever believe that they were good for some reason, but Chaos Demons might be actually good.
No, that book is one-dimensional and has no play, and it will just end up being a terrible long run.
Yep.
It definitely doesn't have some wild powerful sheets and amazing secondaries.
No, it definitely doesn't have 2 secondaries that I think are just absolutely broken.
1 for definite. Yeah, I don't know what the other one you're talking about is. So
I guess there's 1 broken one, and then there's 1 really good one situationally.
Do you mean the action on the action one?
The action one is situationally.
Yeah, it's only okay. You have to live which means that outside of like player place terrain, it's actually not that great.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because you have like
I mean,
most terrain formats will have an objective that you have to like be in the open to stand on, and it's difficult to do that without characters, and then it's hard to keep a character alive if it's not something like Solid Sorcerer.
Yes, but Reality Rebels, on the other hand, very good. Iron Hands were right below Chaos Demons, 14 players, 4.5% meta representation. They had a 58.6% win rate, and then they had one event win, 3 top 4s, and 4 top 10s for a 2.76 over rep for the weekend. Iron Hands, like we said before, are going to be the number one
live
green
Innis
faction.
reaction. I do have one more event of 10th edition or 9th edition. I'm going to a 1250 Tempest of War tournament.
Oh my god!
Don't worry about it.
And then just to taunt Anthony, the next 2 factions are his favorite, and he doesn't even get to talk about it. Chaos Space Marines are the 3rd, and then World Eaters are the 4th best faction with over 10 people for the weekend. At a 3.6% meta representation for Chaos Space Marines, a 4.9 for World Eaters, a 56.9 and a 56.7 win rate, respectively. No event wins for either faction, though. 1 top 4 for Chaos Space Marines, 3 for World Eaters, which I think just continues the trend of them not
a lot of top
quite
4s in a week
hitting championships.
There was only 6 events, right? Like that's 1 in 8 of the top 4s.
I think one of the things to always look at, and Cliff likes pointing this out a lot, is if you look at like the record distribution for World Eaters, it's like very skewed. Like there's a hard drop off essentially at like 4 wins. So there's a lot of people going 4-1 with that faction and just not quite making it to the podium.
Yeah, they should maybe try harder.
But they had a 2.58 over rep, so they are very good. There's something to be said about just having good secondaries and being able to pile drive your opponent into the dirt on some terrain and some
that doesn't sound right.
Mission layouts. Yes, sometimes murders.
What would you need good secondaries for?
I know. I mean, somehow it's still not helping orcs. They're in like 6th.
I don't think anything's going to help that faction at this point. That faction is just actually actively trolling. Unless you're one of like 4 people.
And then because I love to troll people whose factions are doing terribly, we have 2 factions with no players, and that's Imperial Fist and Salamanders. Crimson Fist had 2 players, but they had a collective 16.7% win rate, which ain't great.
Alex, we ate the gang. That's why I'm the size I am.
It's true.
The whole gang was eaten. They could not be here because they are consumed.
Yep. Tyranids had 6 players and a 23.3% win rate, which is kind of terrible and gross. But basically the bottom portion of factions are all under 10. Somehow Craft World Elder are the worst performing faction with over 10 players with a 4.5% meta representation, a 41% win rate, but still have an event win. So, there's that. Perfectly balanced also with an over rep of 0.92.
I hate Craft World so much. They're so broken. Nobody ever wants to do it.
We'll talk about it some more in just a minute because I think you're going to hate them even more soon.
I absolutely will. I mean, I didn't think it was possible, but yeah, no, absolutely.
So, I mean, that's kind of where stats are for the events from the weekend. If somebody really wants to ask questions about more stats, I'll leave the Excel sheet open and I can just open up the Excel sheet later and we can read through it again. Otherwise, for the rest of the meta, since the data slate, Genestealer Colts are the best performing faction, followed by Iron Hands and Chaos Demons. They're the only 3 factions who are over the 55% win rate threshold right now. World Eaters, Space Wolves, and Custodes are kind of the nearest ones, followed by Orcs, Craft World, and then Leagues of Votan.
I got to ask one. We always harp on the Iron Hands. What's the Swift Strikes Masterful Shots win rate for Eldar?
Oh, for Eldar?
Yep.
You started with Iron Hands, so I started clicking on that. Masterful Shot Swift Strikes has a 68% win rate, but it's only 11 games in the thing.
It should be way more than that because we have Vic and Brian from Warhammer Fest at least.
Yeah, it just says 11 games at the moment. That's what I've got.
Yeah, we should definitely have more than that.
But I think the dashboard might not be fully updated yet, but that's what I've currently got them at for just that distribution. I mean, for Iron Hand still, I don't know why people aren't playing something other than regular Iron Hands. Regular Iron Hands have a 50% win rate and somehow still make up 50 or 42% of representation.
We had a regular Iron Hands top 4 this weekend with 30 Desolation Winds and Impulsors. So,
hi, Jeremy.
hey, Jeremy.
Jeremy decided to take pity on me and Innes hammering back and forth and joining in.
Yeah, I just shotgunned some coffee and my headache went away, so I figured I could join you guys.
No
That's
worries.
fair.
But yeah, I mean, Master Artisan's Whirlwind of Rage continues to have a 66% win rate. Whoever is playing Master Artisan's Warded, which is just 6 games, had an 83% win rate. I think that's just one person. Otherwise, like, there are lots of sub-factions that are just better for customized things. Yep, that's kind of it. So I guess I can talk very briefly about math that I think Cliff is going to talk about and publish at some point, just because I think it's really funny. So everybody was complaining about Blood Yahtzee earlier this week, very briefly, because everybody was like, this dice roll thing is terrible, which included Anthony, who like rolled one dice roll and was like, this mechanic is terrible because he rolled like one pair and nothing else or something like that. And so Cliff, in his generosity, spent like an entire weekend hammering out math and doing simulations on all of the pairwise function, like dice rolls you can make, and all of the buffs you could get from the table. And I think his findings are kind of neat. I'm not going to talk about all of the pairwise things because it's just it would be Nathan reading Notepad, and I don't think everybody wants me to do that. I do believe at some point that we'll just post the math in the Discord so that you can all see all of the possible pairwise combinations of things and the chances of getting them. And Cliff ended up running, I think it was 1 million different simulations for each of these to try to get the most statistically accurate probabilities possible for all the different combinations of buffs and how likely it is to get them. But honestly, you can get at least 2 of the buffs 100% of the time because rolling 8 dice that are D6, you're going to get at least one pair or
There's
a
like
triple.
a very small combination that you can roll like 5 different dice and then a triple, which doesn't get you 2, but it's like 36 total options out of the millions of possibilities.
Yep.
So it's just kind of like doesn't happen. But
and then once you start considering rerolls from Berserker units on points, then the math gets kind of tilted even more in your favor. You're always going to get something out of the table. You're going to get Rage, Field, Invigoration, or Wrathful Devotion 100% of the time, even before rerolls. After rerolls, it's still 100%.
Yeah.
Martial Excellence is like 94% of the time. Total Carnage is like 97% of the time. Warp Blades is 92% of the time. And then it starts dropping off after that. Unbridled Bloodlust, which is the advance in charge, is about 60% of the time. And then Reborn in Blood, which is bringing Angron back at full wounds, is only 13.4% of the time. But once you start adding 1 to 3 rerolls into that, those numbers climb up really quickly. So you end up getting a lot of these buffs more often than you think. Like with 1 reroll, you're getting Unbridled Bloodlust, which is that advance in charge, about 2/3 of the time. So the math is real good for that particular Blood Yahtzee thing to get something out of it that's worthwhile. Yeah. If you join our Discord community, you'll be able to probably at some point access this math. We may post it online on the website. I don't know.
Anthony is really trying to get Cliff to write it up properly so we can plaster it everywhere, but we'll see what happens.
Yes.
If Cliff doesn't do it tonight, then tomorrow I'll do it because we got to get this out there.
Yep. Cliff did a ton of work this weekend with some very hyper focus on solving a problem.
Cliff like ADHD'd in on this a little bit.
He did, yes.
I do want to shout out 2 other members of the Discord that helped out with this because there was actually... I dabbled with the problem a little bit, but there were 2 other individuals who went through Felix and man, I'm drawing a blank right now, and Seth, not Oster, but another very cool Seth, were talking incessantly on Saturday about the logic behind rerolls, because that's where things start to really break down. What dice do you reroll when you're looking at a specific set? And then telling the computer how to do that was a lot of fun, question mark.
It was definitely a lot of work. It's funny watching people do all these pairwise tests and things like that outside of science, because I'm like, oh, cool. I don't want to do that. That's a lot of pairwise tests. Nobody wants to do this. But I think it goes to show that table and the blood to Yahtzee mechanic is actually a lot more powerful than people think at first glance. And that some of those things are a lot more likely than they think.
Yeah, you have to play around advance and charge basically every turn because there's always the opportunity that your opponent will just dunk it on you with positive move and scream across the board at you.
Yep. World leaders are still going to world leader like they do now, just without the pregame move, is basically what I've seen. They're just going to get +2, and then they're going to get advance and charge, and then they're just going to run right down your throat.
Pretty much.
That's kind of it for the stats for the week. I don't really want to talk about anything else. So thanks, Cliff, and thank you to our 2 lovely Discord members for helping out with doing all of that math. I think I turned away at one point, and we were talking about how, yes, if you roll 8d6 because there are 6 faces on dice, you're going to get at least 1 duplicate. And then at the end of the weekend, there was a massive notepad document of all these different pairwise probabilities and rerolls. I was like, man, we've come real far since Friday, guys.
The sum of where I got to was the pigeonhole principle means I'll always get doubles and then nothing further. And now people have done the math for me, and I'm like, cool. Still not playing well.
There definitely was a person who at that point did ask why we would always get a pair. And I was like, okay, let's take 2 steps back. We got to talk about how if you have 6-sided dice and 8 dice rolls, always going to get some duplicates. Unless you carved some of those 6 faces into multiple faces just to mess with us.
Well, my dice, one of my dice has a 7 on it. What if I roll that one?
You know, if you roll scatter dice instead of your d6s, that may in fact happen. I'm not going to say it won't. Yes, 2 dice could be cocked, Cooper. It's true.
Yeah, but that's just Zinch then.
Yes, although there's a very Zinchian mechanic that we can talk about from the Zinchian, maybe not Zinchian, very Sisters of Battley mechanic. I guess we can transition to talk.
Let's not talk about Eldar, just for my sanity, please, guys.
No, we're going to talk about it anyways because you have to. Innes leaves the chat.
I honestly don't blame him.
I mean, we don't have to talk about a front-loaded Miracle Dice mechanic being unbalanced, and I guess we won't. We'll let Innes come back to the conversation.
Thank you.
We'll save it for later. Instead, we'll try to summon Anthony by talking about how Angron is so amazing in the new book, despite the fact that he is also
Anthony's
amazing
asking
now.
questions in the show questions bill on Discord now. I'm willing to bet he's not showing.
Oh, that's fair.
Gosh, I have just bought a ticket and a set of cards for a Tempest War tournament on Friday, though, so I'm committed.
Hell
that's
yeah.
awesome. Getting some
I'm going to learn how to play Tempest War. I will be taking options for factions, though, because I will play something stupid for my collection. So that'll be in Discord sometime over the next week or so.
Do you own any flavor of elves?
No. It'll be fine. I need to read the rules, probably.
Do we want to talk about any other 10th edition previews then, since we're not talking about stats?
Neurotown looks kind of fun. I like the is we dancing dudes or we dancing dudes. So I can put them on like mega huge swing cases and be like, "Yep, these are not models; they are tokens." I'm going to model them on like, like the giants. One of them's going to like top of a giant about statue or something like that. Like this is a token.
Yeah, this is a token. I love it. Yeah, that Synapse unit has a little pup following it, and that unit now has a Synapse pup following it too.
Yep. And they're going to be the size of like apocalyptic blast templates, with just one or like amazing. How people do like the giant Great Unclean one or Demon Prince with like the little sword nurgling. It's going to be like that. Could have an entire hero from Biotitan just with that guy on top of it.
I love it.
Just stick it down next to the guy.
The other thing is, I love that we've found our first thing that actually makes Shadows feel a little bit better, because we'd seen leadership for Marines, right? And all the rerolls for Marine style leadership, which really skews the math against Shadows. And we finally got the -1 to this test for Shadows to kind of help it out. Maybe we'll see some more modifiers to Shadows from other units like Neurothropes instead of just the Neurotyrant as well.
If there are stacking modifiers in the Tyranid book, that turn that you pop Shadow is just going to be disgusting.
You might force people with Gilliman and Abaddon to actually just keep the reroll battle shock tests thing up a lot of the time.
I hope I can drop them low enough that even with a reroll, they're 50% to fail. I want like -1 for every different type of synapse creature on the board, and then we can really get some stacks going.
GW finally figured out how to have diverse armies.
Yeah, I want it to be like, if you're within 6 of Rippers, you're just terrified. And if you've like been in combat this game, you're -1 as well, and stuff like that.
See,
the other unit
I haven't seen yet that I'm really curious to see. Sorry, I interrupted you, Nathan.
No, go ahead.
Is OC modifying units.
We saw the one for Vanguard from AdMech who reduced OC by
preview
1.
that.
Because they've replaced their rad saturated like -1 strength, -1 toughness debuff with minus OC on
Yeah, I just
the unit.
completely blanked them from my memory because that data sheet made me very sad.
I mean, fair, because honestly, a lot of the AdMech mechanics aren't amazing. And a lot of people are going to kind of hate the rad saturation bombardment mechanic because it kind of will feel bad for some people. It's not great, and it's also going to make people upset when they decide not to take battle shock tests and take mortal wounds, and then like their whole army takes mortal wounds and they lose a bunch of stuff from it.
No.
Look,
you know what's going to happen is that you're going to opt to not to take the mortal wounds, and they're going to roll 3 damage of every unit in your army. And then when you do it, you're going to fail to do any damage to anything except the one unit that heals.
Because a lot of people have forgotten that for that first one, you still have to roll a 3-up to cause mortal wounds to your opponent's model. So they don't just automatically take D3 mortals. And then it's 1 mortal wound on a 3-up if they're in their deployment zone from turn 2 onwards.
Yep. Oh yeah, and sisters love it because sisters just get to sit there and get +1 to hit for the game. Like,
yes,
I will take damage, please.
I'll take mortal wounds on my indirect heavy weapon.
Your radiation only makes me stronger. Say the Sisters of Battle as they come out.
The Demon's Army just like, we'll take the battle shock so we can heal any damage.
I mean, Necrons with their resurrection protocols probably don't care either, right? Based on what we saw. No,
Necrons just get an extra pregame move back.
Yeah, they get their extra D3 models worth of movement from extending themselves forwards.
I hate
what else? Oh, Barb Gaunts are amazing.
I wasn't that impressed, but
if you can shoot like 8 units with them, and since you only have to hit, you don't have to wound, and they each have D6 shots. It's basically like the current stratagem with Thunderfire shells for slowing everything by 2 inches just across.
We don't know how expensive they're going to be. They're pretty short range. They might be pretty slow. Like, I'm willing to be like, these could be good, but I would need to see more from them because those are definitely gaunt platforms.
Yeah.
And like, I'm never that impressed by it. And it's like, this gaunt needs to shoot you. Hold on a goddamn minute.
It is D6 at like 24 inches, right? So it's like not.
What's going to happen is they're going to die to the rad bombardment.
It's true. 3 of them will die to the rad bombardment, and then they'll be battle shocked and can't do anything. They'll just sit there being like, ah.
Yeah, the problem is I don't have a good sense of scale for what the Barb Gaunt is going to be defensively, because it's a gaunt, but it looks like it's about the size as a warrior. Like, where in that dichotomy is its defensive profile going?
It definitely looks just a little bit bigger than a Termagant in the pictures. Like maybe 2 Termagants stacked on top of each other.
2 Termagants in a trench coat.
2 Termagants in a trench coat makes 1 Barb Gaunt. I mean, then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the new Neurogaunts, who are the chaffiest chaff that ever chaffed.
They look so fucking terrible, by the way.
They extend Synapse, but they have like 1 attack. And they're on a Gaunt chassis. So
they're like,
also...
enough of these could tear down like a squad of things. You're like, they're never making combat. So...
I think they made a joke that one might, if it's very lucky, kill a Terminator, like 1 giant unit. And I was like, that sounds accurate.
Yeah, no, those things are like the size of Space Marines. They're huge.
Are they?
Yeah. I mean,
share a picture.
That's slides. That's not how that works.
If you made a slide that fast, I'd be pretty impressed, actually.
They're like the same size as the Terminator, dude.
They are
massive.
Oh wow, they're a lot bigger than I thought they were.
They're on like 40 bases, so like I have no frame of reference for what these are going to be like defensively. Like that could very easily be P5 3 wounds, or it could be a gaunt, right? Like I don't have a scale here, so
yeah, I mean,
it's really hard to
not
judge
the new bio.
what they're going to look like.
You would assume it's like not as big as a Biovore, but maybe as big as a Biovore. I don't know.
Well, Biovore's on a 60, so it's definitely not as big as a Biovore. But
Yeah, but Biovores also don't really fit on their 60 millimeter bases very well. Although I have the old metal ones, maybe that's just kind of.
I have the old
ruining
metal ones, and they're
moment
like
for me.
goddamn tiny.
Yeah, they're teeny. I had to buy base extenders for them.
Dan, it's Eldar.
Dan Morris asks the question.
And it's Eldar. It's always
if
Eldar.
If you had to pick a top army using only the leaks, what do you pick and why? And right now it'd be Craftworld Eldar because their mechanic is so alpha or beta strike amenable that you could just smack somebody turn 1 and turn 2 with a bunch of
He already
miracles.
owns too much Eldar.
Well, I'm all about just getting people to buy more stuff.
I think you should
guess.
put Tyranids, man. I think you should definitely put Tyranids. Tyranids are going to be cool as hell.
I hope so. They have the
Jake,
coolest looking
the
new
sad
models.
Venom Crawler is stopping you from buying one of the books. I'll buy your sad Venom Crawlers if they're going cheap enough. I think they look awesome.
I think
long as
the
they're in the UK.
Psychophage looks cool.
I think it looks great. I'm a big fan of the model. I like the Venom Crawler. It looks like a better Venom Crawler.
Yeah, I honestly don't think any of the new Tyranid sculpts really are making me like upset with them. I think the Neurogaunt is probably the only one that I'm kind of like about, but I like
The
all the other
Neurogaunt
ones.
The Neurogaunt's okay. I really like the Barbgaunts. I think they're cool, kind of cool.
Same.
I don't know.
And
For me, the worst thing on the turn side is I don't like the Screamer Killer's head. Everything else in the box, I'm okay.
You don't like the weird like
I don't
vents
like
on the side
head.
of its noggin?
Like the Neurogaunts are weird, but I'm okay with weird. I don't like the Uncle Phil looking Carnifex.
Cliff in our chat talking about T6, T7 Custodes reveal.
I mean, it could
I hope
happen.
They're still going to be toughness 5, Cliff. You know that. In your
Oh,
heart,
that would
right?
make. Actually, you
They're
know
going
what?
to be T4. Watch it. They're going to be T4 with a 3-up armor save. They're not going to have a 2-up anymore.
All
They're going to have a 5-up invulnerable save.
All they're getting back is their 3-inch coherency from 7th edition.
Here's the best part that's going to happen. Regular Custodians are still going to be T5, but the Sisters of Silence are going to go T4.
They get tougher. Honestly,
than a Sister of Battle.
The Horus
Custodians are gonna
Heresy
go the 3-up
Sisters
saves.
do have more stuff, and I would kind of like it.
Say
if
psych.
No, we're not going to say
No.
psych, Cliff. Every time a Custodes player talks about getting permanent transhuman, like a monkey's paw curls, and like that faction gets worse. Get out of here.
All I want for Custodians is less.
Yeah, it's fair.
Custodians
How
are
I
the
feel
Eldar
about-
of the Imperium. Like, they just deserve less.
All right. What other 10th reveals do we want to talk about?
Oh, they previewed
wanna-
Votan? Did we do that since the last episode?
Oh, Votan, the ones that made Votan players cry a bunch.
I think
Because
Votan looked great, and I'm excited to build and paint my Votan now.
My favorite reaction, though, was somebody on the Votan Facebook page saying they wanted to send their number 3 judgment token and get a bunch of people together to mail them to the GW headquarters.
I would like a
Because they-
refund for the 3 judgment token, please.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that faction looks good. I think a bunch of people underrate how good +1 to wound is, which is funny to me.
And I'm broadly okay with them getting pushed down to being a BS4 army. It was weird they were BS3 in the first place.
I actually like that they've done that with both them and Admech, as much as I'm sad because 2 of those are armies.
Although Admech definitely didn't need the save reduction, guys. Like, 5-up save on the basic infantry might have been a little much.
Yeah, that
But
was part of the thing where I just pushed the Vanguard data sheet out of my mind because I was like, I have 40 of these guys painted up and I'll never fail.
these guys could be 6 points. It'll be fine.
I mean,
They're gonna be
if
guardsmen costed.
genuine Horde Admech is viable, that could be fun.
Yeah, not for anybody's wallet because that unit is expensive.
Yeah, I would need to buy another
but-
80 infantry.
Yeah,
Admech's already
army
an
is
expensive army.
That army is cult expensive.
Actually, no, I'd only
They-
need another 40 because, oh no, it depends. If
You
they
need
still allow you
80
to do
if they
20
allow you
man.
20s, yeah.
I guess we also got guard previews,
And
which
you
is
could
mostly
need 20
just
of
the
each. You could need
I guess-
like 6 squads of 20 of each, Jeremy, because they could go to 20s on both sides.
no.
Yeah, okay, never mind. Let's just.
We don't talk about it.
No, we
Nobody
don't do
actually
that.
plays Admech. Some people
And then
own Admech, but nobody owns the army.
The guard codex got previewed, which was mostly just a preview of like the volcano cannon. Because they always preview the Baneblade.
Guard was here
Which-
before last. We talked about Guard last week, man. Come on.
Well, I wasn't here.
Yeah, I know, but that doesn't mean the show stopped for you.
Yeah, it does. It means it stops for me.
Yeah, by the way,
all
also,
the
guys,
time.
Bellacore is really cool.
God damn it. Innis is like, we're not talking about guard, Nathan.
Yeah, Bellicore remains the thing I most want to play in 10th edition.
Chaos Demons look amazing again.
Yeah.
Like
Bellicore's the data sheet that has me most excited about 10th edition so far.
I mean, Bellicore's got one of the best buffs. You can't shoot my units if you're outside of 18 inches.
Like, it's invisibility, but better.
It is a 6-inch aura, though, right? It's not your whole army.
Yeah,
It's
but
within
you can
6
cram
inches.
a lot of stuff within 6 inches of 100mm base.
That's true. It's not even
No,
wholly
just
within. It's
the
just
wording.
within.
Is it wholly within?
No, it's just within.
Oh no!
You're gonna have a whole bunch of Keepers of Secrets and Lords of Change tagging his aura range. It's like
just
fucking
big
John
boy
Cena
time.
of the army.
Just big boy time. Just 3 keepers and Shalaxi waiting.
Yeah. It's the John Cena army. You gonna come with an 18 of me? Are you? Are you?
Oh, I love it.
Oh, actually, now that we've seen the Bellicore datasheet as well as Scarbrand's weapons, one of the things we can talk about is the fact that Ignore Inbones appears to have disappeared from the game entirely.
Yep.
Or at least so far. I am not holding out that Harlequins don't still have it for some goddamn reason.
If it's a situational...
Bellicore, Scarbrand, and Linked Fire, it's so far broadly gone.
Yeah.
If it's a stratagem, I think it's okay. For like 1 unit, it's probably okay.
Yeah, like we currently have it on like weird random places like Catan can have it, and the Zeno Phase Blade and Deathwatch. And I'm always okay with it being in like those weird little places. It's when ignore invulnerable saves is an army-wide rule that just like things have incidentally when you play it, but I don't really enjoy the mechanic.
I think the first unit to even have it, and the one for the longest time that only had it, was just the Nightbringer, right?
Well, Nullzone Death Hex have been around since...
well, yeah, psychic powers, but I mean a unit whose weapons ignored invulnerable saves.
Nullzone had a downside, and that affected you as well.
Calidus from 8th edition, I guess.
Didn't that work the other way around?
No, that's the Calexis. Calexis ignores the armor saves. Calidus ignores
they had the Phase Blade, so they ignored invulnerable saves.
But we've seen like Lockward in this edition, and like obviously like the Vanquisher and the rail side and things like that.
Gilmaris, we saw the better railgun, which was a Hana Votan vehicle, so I think that's the template for the new railgun. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah.
Although Dev Wounds is just a better way of doing ignore involves, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it also gives you damage spell innately, which is
better.
A little spooky if it ends up on the wrong guns.
Jake, you can't dissuade me from Custodes players talking garbage all the time. Tau players are just second on the list. They're right behind them. For talking just absolute nonsense about their faction. I'm sure somebody out there says, yeah, if I get 5 marker lights on something, I should auto hit and auto wound a unit.
That is how Custodes players sound, actually. I think we should just auto hit with all our weapons is actually something I've heard a Custodes players say. And I've
heard them seriously talk about better transhuman on them where you can only win them on 5s as well. That was a serious thing that they were proposing for a while.
I'm also not seen a transhuman mechanic yet so far.
No, we haven't. We haven't seen a transhuman or a transhitman.
We've seen Armor Contempt, and that's broadly been it. I think the Farseer was our first source of -1 to wound as well.
Mm-hmm. The Farseer's psychic power is really good on a 2-up. Like a 2-up to make a unit -1 to wound.
I think the best thing with the Farseer is that it's a powerful psychic ability on one side and a powerful psychic shooting ability, which is cool. But you don't have like the 15 options you have to see with them now. Like it's one thing. Farseers do a thing. You either want a Farseer or you don't. You don't have the every list wants a Farseer because they do everything now. You have maybe some lists want a Farseer, maybe some lists want a Farseer Skyrunner, maybe some lists just don't want one. And I think that's a much better direction than, hey, the Farseer does everything. You have to have a Farseer in the list.
I wonder if Skyrunners will have different psychic powers as well. Like so far, we've only seen the one.
Have different powers
because we haven't seen Doom yet, and Doom is one of those powers that, like, Eldar have been known for like 3 editions. We have seen Doom.
It's just on the Falcon. It's on the Falcon.
I wonder if those vehicles will get assault ramps. Wave Serpents with assault ramps, Falcons with assault ramps.
No. If any Eldar bullshit gets it, it's going to be Raiders and Venoms.
I hope they do. Have you seen the little tiny assault ramp that pops out of a Raider? They slide, just slides out little gangplank, and that's the assault ramp.
Take the plank.
Take the plank. I would honestly just put that on people's models if I could. Just be like, yep, assault ramping out. Bye.
Brian, you say 2+ rerollable attacks, the 2.78% chance of too much variance, but the number of times I attacked with Gullum this weekend that he missed, I don't like it. Primarch should all hit. Custodians should not.
Primarch should just have flamer weapons, both in shooting and melee.
Yes, they
just
should.
torrent weapons in melee. I guess
Right.
which of the big units, like Primarch equivalent units, is the best so far? Then in people's mind, is it Be'lakor? Is it
Be'lakor? Yeah.
Well, I guess I didn't have to get down the list. It's Be'lakor, but I think
So we've seen what? We've seen Be'lakor, we've seen Guilliman, we've seen Abaddon, we've seen Swarmlord.
Swarmlord's at the bottom of that list.
No, I don't think he is.
Technically,
I think
Call.
Swarmlord is the second best, but the worst, but the least killy. And I think that's an important distinction. I think Swarmlord's buff abilities are super good, and I think we'll see a lot of use out of them because extra CP and denying CP is a phenomenal combination on something with leader as well. He's the only one of them we've seen with leader, which is very different to the rest of them.
All the other ones have
he's the only
one
one who
operative or
attaches
no
to a
protection.
Yep.
Although the unit he can...
Yeah, Be'lakor is by far the number one, but Be'lakor, I would conservatively guess, is going to be like twice the points of the Swarmlord.
I hope so, because the Swarmlord's datasheet is like not very punchy and not very shooty, but is very buffy.
Swarmlord's less swingy than you think, just because he has full rules to wound. Like, he actually does have a reasonable amount of damage up into a lot of targets, whereas a lot of the guys are relying on like a pretty weak sweep attack now, because almost all the sweep attacks got pushed down to 1 damage. Oh, I'm sorry, I think Angron is probably better than Swarmlord as well.
So Angron's was interesting because Angron used to have 3 sweep attacks for every main attack, but they were damage 1, but now he gets 2 and they're damage 2, so it actually got better.
Yeah, but he went down from 39 attacks to 18, so you know, swings and roundabouts.
He does come back at full wounds now, which is a lot better than before, where he
just comes back significantly less often.
And because he comes back in reserves, you can rapid ingress him.
But it's actually fairly likely that if once Angron dies, you will just not see the 666 to bring him back.
Sure, yeah.
So, whereas now you can guarantee bring him back. So he gains a lot of potential, but loses a lot of consistency. It's just how good that first life is now with the rapid ingress as an option might be worth it.
So one of the interesting things that I was just noticing, because I was flipping through the 5 previews that we've had in the last week. So we've had World Eaters, Leagues, Sisters, Demons, and Eldari. World Eaters were the only one that didn't show the detachment rule.
Maybe they don't have one. No, my guess is that it's just tied to a mechanic they're not previewing yet.
Maybe. Yeah. Or it could just be +1 strength attack on the charge, because that's what they've always had.
Yeah, I just broadly... I'm assuming that when they're previewing stuff, if there's something they don't want to preview just now, they're just sidelining it.
They also previewed a Baneblade instead of a Lehman Russ or any kind of command unit whatsoever. And then somebody, Jake in chat, is like, yeah, the Baneblade giving cover is amazing. I'm like, yeah, it's amazing until it blows up and does D6 mortal wounds to everything.
D6 plus 2.
Plus 2, sorry. And just wipes your entire army sitting behind it.
It's 2+ dead character level. I love it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, Disflux Angron does not have the towering keyword. Neither does Be'lakor, and neither does the Keeper, which means that you can hide them.
Death Guard will be so overwhelming tomorrow. Nah, man, you don't understand. They're just 17.1 inches away from you. They're coming. I promise. Rapid ingressing Death Shard are going to be the future, man. I tell you.
Sebastian just said exactly that. So Jinx.
Same wavelength, Sebastian. I got you. Right. I suppose I can do the plugs and then we can move on to some questions. Save that paper as always.
I guess I should thank somebody before we do plugs, because John Winter is amazing. And he was giving all the money to get me to Canada, and now I'm going to Canada because he just up and paid for my plane ticket. So I will be in Canada in July for playing like my first event of 10th, most likely. Trying to get a golden ticket off of the Canadians, I guess, which means at some point after 10th indexes come out, I'll have to like really hard grind for a while to try to get that to happen.
Yeah,
so I can go and
DM a certain person.
Yeah, I'm gonna DM like, yes, there's John. So I'm just gonna DM like the entire hive mind of people that I know and like try to hammer out games until I win and take home whatever nonsensical blacksmith prize perhaps is at this event.
We're getting you to first place, Nathan. I promise.
The blacksmith prize for this event is the Lion's Shield.
Oh, that's excellent. I love that. It's much better than trying to bring a scimitar back through customs.
We'll probably just ship it to you regardless because
Yes.
it might not fit in your carry-on.
Honestly, I'm flying on an airline where I looked at their cost for checked baggage, and it's like $200 to put checked baggage in for some reason.
Yeah, we'll ship it to you.
Don't ask me. We're gonna ship it. I'm gonna have that confidence I'm gonna win it. So thank you, John. That was really amazing of you. This community is great. That's all I gotta say.
Yep. And for anyone who is interested about the event, if you heard a whole lot about the All Is Dust event that we held in the same city, Petawawa, back in March that Anthony came down to, we do have plenty of tickets available for this. We have rented out an entire hockey arena to run the event out of. And as Nathan said, we are giving away 4 golden tickets, invites to the World Championships of Warhammer. And they are just going to be to the top 4 generals who have not already received golden tickets, because you can't take 2.
Apparently, there's an event in Mexico that has 2 golden tickets.
There's an event in Malta that's got a couple golden tickets and one in Luxembourg. So if you want to do a tour of all the tax havens of Europe, you can have a couple of shots.
I love it.
Can go sit on the beach and play. Hopefully the Mexican event is like on the beach, so you can just play on the beach the whole time.
Jake, how realistic is to do an event in Montreal if you speak no French at all? I frequently go with people from my area who speak no French at all, and they get by just fine. Speaking French is an asset there, but it is not something that is absolutely necessary. Montreal is a very diverse city. It is the business hub for the province of Quebec, and in fact, leading up to until about 30 years ago, was actually one of the main business hubs of Canada. So there are a ton of English speakers there.
I mean, I hope I don't
native
even know
English, then
French.
at least bilingual players. And Bruno, who runs the majority of the events in Montreal, is actually heavily encourages games being played in English, since almost all the FAQs that he uses, because he uses the WTC set of FAQs, are only available in English. So he doesn't want to be bouncing back and forth between the 2 languages, even though French is his first language.
I like how it's easier to go to an event in continental Europe and speak English than it is to go to an event in Canada.
Also, if you go to a major city in Canada, it's fine. The challenge arises when you go to the smaller cities in Quebec. Basically, as soon as you get more than 100 kilometers from Montreal on the Quebec side, especially going east, things get challenging.
And Brian Seabass, if I want to go to Malta, I'd love to go to Malta, but if I need help getting a plane ticket, I'm not doing that on air. If you want to pay for me to fly to Malta with you to play with you, Brian, over there, I'll go. And
if somebody wants to pay for me to go to Canada, that's also an option, Martin. But you're not going to do that.
No,
so
don't send Innes. I don't want him to be at this event.
Yeah, but Innes already has a ticket, so he won't be stealing one from you.
Exactly.
I know, but I want the shield as well.
That's true. I don't know if we would necessarily ship that to Scotland. That might be a bit pricey. The States is affordable.
It's fine. I'll just disassemble it and take it with me.
Disassemble the line.
I'll just send it back in Brian's business class. Brian will come over with me.
Fair. Yeah, I'm sure both of you are going to show up to an event a week before the WTC.
Yeah, 100%. 100% going to be there. Please, nobody pay to send me to Mexico. That sounds dangerous. I've been watching Better Call Saul. I'm not interested.
Innes is also very, very white. I can't imagine that he would turn anything other than lobster red if he went to Mexico.
I'm lobster red now, like just on camera. Like
that's just from the lights of his room. Can you imagine what the sun would do?
Right, I'm gonna do the plugs because hashtag skill issue. Something. Thanks for watching the show. We really appreciate it. Good job, peeps. Hey, everybody. I know. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being with us for the show so far. Really appreciate you all being here. We couldn't do this without all of your support, so we really appreciate all of you being here. To that end, we have a couple of options for support. If you're in a position to, we would love you to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/statcheck. There you can get access to our Discord and all of us, as well as a bunch of bonus content from myself, from Nathan, from never Jeremy. Jeremy doesn't do bonus content. That's not his thing. But also a bunch of stuff from Typhus and Anthony. You also get access to our Discord, which is a wonderful, wonderful hub of all kinds of shenaniganry in 40k and out of 40k, up to and including extremely, extremely aggressively positive health stuff, which is great because some of us, like me, really need that. So yeah, it's a great Discord. We really recommend you be there. It's a great, great community. Nathan?
We also crowned our first Vibe Check League champion, which is Sam Lemon, who won overall just last weekend.
First? Excuse you. First 40k Vibe Check League champion.
Oh, sorry. First 40k Vibe Check League champion, not
Thank
first
you.
Vibe Check champion ever. That would be Innis, who won our Star Wars Legion Vibe Check League.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. But good job, Sam.
Well done, Sam. What did Sam played like a few different armies throughout it, right?
Yes, he did. He played a few. I think he played a couple different armies throughout. Let me pull up the event
all the way through.
Oh,
real quick.
Well, then I don't really want to congratulate him.
He did a good job, though.
Sure.
He and Isaac played in the finals, which was apparently a good game.
Yep. So otherwise, we really appreciate if you could just, chuck a like on the video, subscribe, recommend us to a friend, all the stuff that you do for all the other people and they all ask you for. I know it sucks to ask every week, but it really helps. And if we don't ask, people don't do it. Leave a comment. That's the one that really helps us out the most because it shows that people are interacting with the videos. We do our best to comment and do a response. We don't always get there, but we should try. Lastly, or I suppose nextly, there's a bunch of other shows on the network you can check out. That's X and 1 and End of the Matrix. X and 1 should be recording an episode this Thursday, I think, because they didn't do one last week.
Yep.
Or they did one last week. I don't know.
They
X and 1 will be
coming
out
this week.
Should be coming out this Thursday. That's our show where we talk about Cliff and Tim talk about all things about being an excellent 40k player while also having a ton of other life commitments. It's a wonderful show if you are in a similar position, or if you're not and might be at some point, or just want some cool dad vibes. Highly recommend. End of the Matrix is the other show that's worth checking out. That's Typhus's show where he goes through all things team related with Birmingham teams coming up. If you're attending that in the UK, it's a great place to start for some additional help with your preparation. Lastly, myself and Typhus both offer coaching. If you're interested in hearing any more from us on a one-to-one basis, drop us an email at coaching@stat-check.com or check out stat-check.com/coaching, which are the same URL, just in weird different orders with different punctuation to make things confusing for me. That's all I got on the plugs. We're going to move on to show questions. We're going to field about half an hour, 4 minutes of these, and then I'm going to bed. So let's get into the Discord questions. I don't have them open. Come on.
Oh, fine. I'll go open them. Give me 2 seconds. I was
have
like,
them open. I'll start.
No, I'm getting to them.
All right, get there.
Yeah, just give me a second while I open show questions. Somebody named Eric forgot that we have a thread that you're supposed to ask questions in. So if you want your question answered, Eric Cultist John, you better go put it in the questions thread. All right. Sam actually has the first question. When you look at other aspects of the Warhammer hobby, like the lore or painting, you notice the number of views and subscribers generally is much larger than the competitive gaming side. Why do you think that is, and what is it going to take for the competitive gaming side to grow?
We're a niche.
Yeah, I think it's good to recognize and to realize that competitive 40K is like the small portion of it. And we've done the math on it, right? Most players who go to events go to one event or 2 events at most. And then people like Innis are like by himself, basically, at like that end of things. There's like one data point and it's just Innis all the way on the
It's like
other
me,
side.
Manny, and TJ and a few other people who are like actual psychopaths.
And we don't actually even have the RTT data to back some of that stuff up. I know that some people go to RTTs instead of larger GTs. In my local 40K community, I know that we always max out our RTTs when they're run. So like we always get up to 20 people playing our single day events. So there are always going to be people we don't capture in that data, but the more serious competitive people who are going to GT events, there aren't that many of them, and not that many people go to more than one event, really. So it's
also just, it's a lower barrier to entry, right? Anybody can, like, you don't have to be actively involved in painting or the lore or like reading 40K to want to watch lore videos or painting videos because they're just fun to watch. Gaming content has this very much restriction of you kind of need to want to play the game to care about the gaming content. Yes, you can follow the tournament scene a little bit, but unless you understand what's going on, the barrier to entry to this kind of content is just a lot higher than the content is for, like my dad can sit and watch painting videos or battle reports. My dad's not going to get a lot out of watching this.
Yep.
So, there's just that difference in accessibility. That's not necessarily it's a limitation of the format. It's not a downside, right? We understand what we are within the space, but growing it is more about extending the community to reach more people, right? So doing more outreach in terms of running more and better events, being more accessible, all these kind of things that are, the things that we're all trying to do in our own communities and in the global community.
Be the best ambassador to your game locally, and the competitive community will grow. Also, go watch things like Taylor, which was part of Mob Rules, and I think a couple of other things at various points where you can hear some of those lore things, because those are also fun. Not all content needs to be competitive content, and that's okay.
Not all competitive content is for everyone.
Yep. 2, Innis, also from Sam, is Innis, you talked about how you come from a League of Legends background, I assume is the LOL acronym. Yep. What does 40K have to learn from League of Legends or other esports?
I honestly don't really know. I wasn't involved in League in like a competitive sense. It was more like it was the game I followed competitively, and the pro ecosystem, like the competitive ecosystem in that game, is so wildly different. I think there's some things you could take from it in terms of like invitational formats are cool and people care about them. Like you can run an event where you just bring in the best players and you try to make every game super interesting and put as much value there as content wise. Things like the Las Vegas Open that ran during COVID was a great example of that, where they just got a bunch of really good people, a lot of great personalities, players, and said, hey, we're going to stream every single game from this, make it all super cool, and do a bunch of hype around it. And that's great. And that was something similar happened with like the really small GW Invitational they did, where they invited like 8 people or 16 people or something like that, and had a really cool tournament where it was just, every game was fairly high stakes. That kind of thing, I think we could take a lot more of in 40K. Things like the Nova Invitational, the LGT Invitational are all really cool events that deserve a lot of spotlight that maybe just don't get it, and making sure that the right people go to those and that you run those, because like we're starting stepping up and doing a Scottish Invitational for our ranking system here, just to try and get people involved, say, hey, there's an end goal to this, and we stream games from that because people care about the best players playing everything. Streaming, the early rounds of a tournament is great for, the casual viewer on the GW stream, but for competitive players, like you want to see the best games. Seeing the best games from round 1 probably means calling the chaff a little bit on some events, and invitations are going to do that, and I'd like to see more of those in 40K.
Makes sense. So I'm going to... go ahead, Jeremy, if you wanted to answer that question.
I was just going to add a little bit. I think one of the things also that esports tends to have, like LoL, Dota, I don't know what the other ones are. Dota was one I played back in the day, is player narratives. We don't focus as much on those. And I know there's a fine line between cult of personality and worshiping players and following their trajectories. So like a really good example of that were the last 2 LVO and ITC winners. Siegler doing it in 6 events only with 6 scores, and Jack doing it with 6 different factions effectively. Yep. Things like that, where you kind of focus, where you hype up what people can achieve going through it.
The other thing I think you need to take from esports is just money. Like, there's not enough money in 40K to really get those same kind of like established professional team kind of rivalry competitiveness that you see in League of Legends and other esports stuff. Like, the pots for those events and for even Magic the Gathering events are a lot larger than 40K events.
Which again goes to back what we talked about a week ago or 2 weeks ago with respect to the mass appeal of it, as well as the streamability or ability to follow games.
Mm-hmm.
For things like Dota and League, you can very easily hype up what's going on the map. For Magic, you can talk about the decks. Things are usually happening fairly quickly. With 40K, there's a lot of downtime, and games are really long.
Yeah, the other problem is the problem with 40K is there's a ton of downtime, but the second you have a second game, you lose all sense of what's going on in both. So like the Warhammer Fest stream had this, where it had 2 games streaming, and that was great in that there was no downtime in the action, but you missed a ton of stuff in both games because often there's something going on in both. It's really a really difficult game to stream without having really knowledgeable and like very effective commentators. I don't think player audio is as good. Like, frankly, if you're trying to put on a high level production, player audio is not the way to go because players are not invested in creating a good streaming experience, right? So, yeah, I get it that it's an easier way to do it and there's a low barrier, but good commentary is the best way to run a stream. It's also incredibly difficult and requires a really, really, really high like expertise base from both your stream team, like the people that are actively commentating, and also the people who are like on the ground observing the game to feedback information, because you don't want to be disturbing the players as they go. Now, Player Mike's sidesteps a lot of that because you can have a host who is doing like the fill the soft time, and then the guys there. But the guys there aren't like they're playing game before here, right? They're not there to create a good streaming experience. So there's always that little, I get why streams like War Games Live do it, and it's great for the scale that they're operating at, but it's not the one that will do. Like, that's not the one that's going to explode, right? It's not the esports format that you would really want for that.
100%. So there's a paired set of questions from Tom and from Dan in the Discord. The first one is, what faction players are the most self-loathing? And then the second one is, what factions are the most loathed?
Eldar and Eldar.
I think the faction that's actually most loathed is Tau, and I think that's a cultural phenomenon that's just embedded in 40K at this point.
Yeah, people really do hate Tau, and I get it. The army has such a dull playstyle, but Eldar players deserve worse.
I think the faction that's the most self-loathing is Eldar, which is funny because they're also the best faction across editions.
It's definitely Chaos players.
Oh,
Chaos players. It's actually probably just Chaos in general, because I've never met a Death Guard or Thousand Suns or Demons or Chaos Space Marines player that doesn't hate their current codex.
That's fair. Custodes players are creeping up there, though, from the most loathed faction standpoint. I think it's like they're creeping up there with Tau to be like the faction.
That's because this edition they've been the counterspell codex, and nobody likes the counterspell codex.
Yeah,
also true.
And also, when the codex came out, Custodes players by and large were insufferable, complaining about how bad the codex was, and then it went on to peak at 70% win rates.
Yeah, I mean, it got to the point where they got buffed. Somebody complained so loudly that they got buffed.
They got point cuts after making 3 of the top 8 at LVO.
They released those during, basically, or like right immediately after, and it was like, so somebody complained real loud about how they were bad and got them buffed, and then they
now Misericordias are free.
Yep. God dang it. This is why I never trust Custodes players whenever they talk about balance. This is that one thing is why.
Custodes players for is that Battlescribe still doesn't default to just giving your guys Misericordia. You have to still actively add it to every model, and that's the only thing that I'll forgive them for is the RSI.
And then you have to click it a whole 9 times in a game.
Exactly.
Then what are some good Magic... The Grant asks this question, which is, what are some good Magic the Gathering game theory articles that are must-reads for aspiring competitive players? Who's the Beatdown is like the article that you should read for Magic the Gathering, and you mention it in your question. It's like
you should read Who's the Beatdown 2, not the first one. But
I mean, you could read both, but Who's the Beatdown 2 is better. You can link to one of those in the show notes later.
PVDDR, Palavito Damadorosa, is one of the Hall of Famers for Magic. He has a pinned tweet. It's just some really great Magic articles. I would recommend just go and check that out. Get it from the mouth of an actual Magic player. Some of them won't translate great, but a lot of them will. I couldn't really bring up some specific examples right now of ones that are quick to read. If you're just looking for general good watching recommendations, I'd recommend Ristic Studies on YouTube, who does great documentaries about cool card history, which is fun. Not at all relevant to 4K. I just like the guy.
Then I'm going to skip a couple questions because there's a lot of questions for Anthony this week, and he's not even here. There's honestly four questions for Anthony, which is kind of funny. Ethan asks, for fun, what realistic changes to Death Guard would you want to be made that would make you interested in playing them?
I like the faction now. I think they're cool. They're a cool faction that's super interesting. They just needed one passive secondary, and they would have been fine this edition.
Yeah.
They've been kind of betrayed by the way Game Structure was balanced rather than anything. I think right now they're actually not that bad because Fleeing Vectors and Spread the Sectors are reasonably easy to score. They're just kind of lacking a third, which just makes them not very dynamic, which means they're pushed into playing an aggressor role in a game where they really want to be the defender role. and that just doesn't
Mhm.
jive. So what I really want from them is a bit more capacity to play the patient game, where instead of having to be the one that's making it happen.
Something that allows them to play the attrition game more effectively, yeah, would probably be the thing that they need most. The next question is in 10th edition, which weapon rule do you want to spam? Twin linked, devastating, or sustained hits? And I think I know the answer.
Devastating on volume fire, twin linked on small stuff, sustained hit on volume fire. But I think sustained hits is just less cool than twin linked.
I think if I had to pick just one of them, I think devastating is my number one. Just because mortal wound conversion is real nice, and there's still a lot of
you need it on 6s, whereas twin linked makes your guns more reliable.
Sure,
you aren't looking.
I think part of it is
that
value. We've seen enough rerolls so far in the game that I feel like devastating blows is going to be more.
It's also kind of army dependent, right? Like in a vacuum, you don't really get the option. Like in Space Marines, devastating wins every day because you have all the moment. In Tyranids, I don't know. Like twin link seems pretty good because you've got all these 6s to hit, do cool things anyway. So getting like some consistency on the other stuff is good. Whereas dev wounds, you're like bypassing the wound roll and a bunch of stuff with lethal hits potentially. So there's always context around this. Generally, I would rather, like, if this rule would have dev wounds instead of twin linked on his swords, I think it'd be a lot worse. So generally, I think twin linked is going to be stronger.
I feel like if he didn't have twin linked, he'd have more attacks, but that's a different story for a different day.
Sure, but just like on a one-to-one swapping the keywords basis.
Sure. Yeah. And in that situation, I understand. Anthony actually is asking a question. Frequently, people refer to America as a first world country. What fucking part do I have to live in for functional internet?
But here, Scotland has pretty functional internet, so I think you should move here.
And significantly cheaper too.
It's pretty funny because Anthony actually made my internet like 500 million times better by suggesting a better router. So my internet stability has improved significantly over time. So Chicago, I guess.
He can lead others to salvation, but not himself.
Eric Cultus Chan, who I was telling earlier that he needs to put his questions in the show questions thread.
He's done it.
Yeah, he's done it. If rumors are true and towering lets you ignore obscuring offensively, what implications do you feel that will have for the game?
I don't think it's a rumor. I think it's very clearly written in the terrain rules that they previewed, which makes Big Knights really funny.
More windowless ruins.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you're gonna see. It's gonna be like, and those ruins don't have windows anymore.
Yeah,
we're all gonna play with WC black ruins. No more grays.
All those windows are getting boarded up. That's what's gonna happen. So that Big Knights don't just shoot armies to pieces from across the map.
Having a balance of them would be interesting, though, because it would.
Yeah, it'd be.
But you would have to have them like mid-board.
But LVO's going to be a nightmare.
Oh God. Yeah, our first floor line of sight is blocking. Yeah, but your second floor is.
Like the Games Workshop terrain mostly has like extensions on the top of them, so it'd be hard to see.
Yeah, you can hide underneath there.
Yeah, so you can hide underneath. Their layouts would need to improve a bit. Sometimes, yes. On the orc terrain is what I always remember for some reason instead of some of their other layouts.
Orc terrain that's 3 inches tall. You can, like, a contemptor can see over that terrain. It's hilarious.
Yeah, because on some tables we did discover that on the GW terrain, a Big Knight could actually just walk up and touch and see in. So now that they don't have to walk up and touch, their angle is from back here. That
was what happened in my game with Brian on the in the semifinals. Is I pulled his objective. So we played secure missing artifacts, and he got first objective move, so he made his top left objective safe. So I pulled his home objective fully onto the plate, so his Night Spinner couldn't stand touching it, and you have to put another unit there, because otherwise the Contemptor could see it over the top of the orc terrain.
As usual, the issues with GW terrain persist.
So, there are some. Stat check host, which of the following, this is Chris who's asking, Chris Irvine. Stat check host, which of the following should I play at the 1250 point Tempest of War event? Eldari, an excuse to paint Eldrad or the Yinkarn. Guard, excuse to buy Adorn. Grey Knights, motivation to paint infantry, or Votan YOLO bikers.
I think you should play Grey Knights, Chris, because you haven't played Grey Knights in ages and you bought the full army and never got to use it. So
that sounds as good as reason as any.
I was going to say Guard because the Dorn's an amazing kit, but that's probably a better reason.
But you'd have to get a 3D printed Dorn hole, and that's going to take a while.
You just hide
store snacks in there. Maybe you could store your Tempest of War. You could use it as a deck box for your Tempest of War.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
God, I want somebody to do that so badly.
Eric has another question. Who do you think is the single most influential / important content creator / channel for 40K? Joe from War Games Live, I assume, the Titans, Art of War, Duncan Rhodes, not counting Stat Check, of course. I actually think
so
it
we're
is
not
Duncan
even
Rhodes.
close. It's also
think
not
it's
Duncan Rhodes.
No, it's not Duncan.
It's 100% mini wargaming, and it's not.
Yeah.
Actually, that's true. It
They're-
is mini wargaming now
So-
that you mentioned them.
I will say their influence has definitely waned in the last few years, but they are kind of the OGs.
Mini wargaming is the reason I got back into 40k.
Yeah.
In the end of at the start of 8th edition.
Yeah, for me it was tabletop tactics, which is very funny that the Brit got back into it because of Canadians, and the Canadian got back into it because of Brits.
Yeah, I was just like at uni, like watching YouTube on my iPad, and like mini wargaming popped up as a recommendation. I was like, oh yeah, I used to play this, and then I just started watching like everything, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna go buy this again, aren't I?
I mean, when I first
That was,
started
like, end of
playing,
7th edition.
when I first started playing 40k again at the end of 8th, it was mini wargaming that I was watching first to try to get caught up on like what a game of 40k looks like, because they were definitely making like the best produced battle reports essentially until Tabletop Titans came onto the scene. But the only reason I said Duncan
40 Minutes owns that one.
I hadn't actually really watched a lot of 40k in 40 minutes until later, and they definitely do have a higher quality overall. I think for a while it was because Tabletop Titans were producing some of the competitive, so like some legitimate competitive 40k content.
Yeah.
When Mini Wargaming and others were producing competitive 40k content with a heavy emphasis on the quotation marks for some of that stuff. The only reason I say Duncan Rhodes is because everybody knows Tooth and Goat's paid to this point.
I think like in recent years, like Duncan has been a lot more influential. But I think if we're specifically talking about like 40k, like as a game, I think like the most popular battle report channels are the ones that push people to actually play the game. Painting models is kind of separate from that for me.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. The hobby channels definitely do get a huge amount of traction, though, comparatively.
Yeah.
Compared to 40K
and the lore channels too. Like there is those kind of three areas. Some of them cover all of them, but the majority they each have their.
I just don't know how much either of those two convert into people actually actively playing 40k.
That's fair. I guess it depends on how you consider influence over it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Joe from War Games Live is becoming one of the more influential people very quickly over 40k as well.
I would say that he is one of the most important ones right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because he gives people who don't get the opportunity to play in tournaments a lot a weekly glimpse into what tournaments are like, because no one else is doing that. You have content creators who will talk and do tournament reports a few times a year, like Scary from Scarredcast does really good tournament reports, but he's one person. He can only go to so many tournaments in a year, whereas Joe's is like, I'm going to do a tournament almost every single weekend.
Yeah, realistically, you could probably also include things like Frontline, WTC, Bell of Lost, spiky bits into like this conversation of like things that have a very outsized impact on the community or like the reach of the community. Like, I don't love the content that some of those sites create, but I can't deny that it's a lot of eyes on 40k.
And they are influential.
The other thing that I think it's important for us to mention is definitely also Peter the Falcon and Val Heffelfinger, who created 40k Stat Center, that
a lot of
heavily influenced the creation of this show. Like, the reason that this show exists is in part because Stat Center stopped existing and there was a void for stats-based content. And while our focus is definitely different than Stat Center's was, because we don't do interviews and things like that, we do still cover the stats and generation of stats.
Because none of us are going enough to ask 15 people for interviews a week.
Oh God, I could never do it. And then Ashley Thompson asked a question that I actually think is important, because it is sometimes a little bit too much hate that we produce, which is, can we have some elf positivity, please? What's each of the hosts' favorite thing about Eldari? So I actually played most competitive 40k with Drukhari. And Drukhari are a faction that I would go back to in an instant if I thought that paint engines and like Coven stuff was good again. I hope that in the preview, whenever eventually, that they show some really cool Drukhari stuff. I have been working on painting up some court models because I've been trying to flesh out my range of models from the Drukhari army. And also because I love the scheme for that army. It's like bright pink and green, so it looks like somebody's acid trip. I guess fine. And for Eldari, I actually don't own any Eldari anymore. I own a bunch of Harlequins. I haven't played as Eldari, but I do like Eldari vehicles bunch. I think their vehicle stuff are amazing.
No,
And
don't
Wraith
listen to
Knights.
Brian. Ashley specifically said elf. And the
Oh,
dark elves
fair.
count.
Yeah, also, Brian, you're full of shit. Drakari are Eldari. They're not Asuryani.
Ah, that's fair. That's a good point.
Fair weather
Look
elf
at that.
player over here.
Look at Innis over here spitting facts about
the only
elves that he
the
hates.
single cool thing about the elf super faction is the Inkard. The only cool model they have, the only cool set of rules they have. I hope that unit absolutely fucks next edition.
I love the avatar. The new avatar of Kane model is real cool. I think most elf vehicles are cool looking. I love my Harlequins army.
For me, the thing that I like most about elves as a super faction is that the vast majority of their models are really good at showcasing talented painters. Because you have a lot of what
I really like nothing to do with their gameplay.
I really
like how Dan J paints them. That's my favorite thing about elf.
That's fair. You know what? You can just say that you like their model range when it's painted well. That's also elf positivity.
I mean, saying you like their model range is maybe a bit of a stretch when some of the models that exist are older.
I like what their model range enables.
I mean,
they do have some very dated models that could use a refresh,
like warp spiders that I think actually are older than Innis.
Yes, they are. Brian's warp spiders that are fully converted look amazing.
Fully converted from autarks.
The only model that everybody has spares of because they're terrible this edition. Oh man, and I think this is a good point as well that's followed up on Ashley Thompson's point, which is Dakota, who's asking what's the difference between joking about a faction and hating with vitriol a faction.
Okay, so when you hear me speak about orcs and elves, it's hating with vitriol. I don't know what anybody else's line is, but
so there's a difference between being a jerk about it to people. Like the reason I don't play Tau anymore is because people were constantly shitting on it. And so I switched to a different faction because people constantly shit on it. Because I was like, I don't want to play an army that when I show up to the table, people are like, oh, I got to play Tau. Such a garbage faction. I do, because I've gotten past the point of caring what other people think. And now I just put them in the ground instead. That's what I do, Innis. I'm like, man, that was a real cool army you had, and then I dunk the whole thing with a relic contemptor.
Brian, I don't hate Tau at all. I actually quite like Tau as an army. I don't think their playstyle's very fun, but I like the models, and I think they have dynamic options. I think playing against them sucks when they're strong, but that's not the same thing as disliking a faction.
You should always draw the line between bullying people in your local community, which sometimes participating in those jokes can do, and you should understand that the way that you're joking is interpreted by others may not be viewed as joking.
And that's only okay if they play Custodes.
Yes, it's only okay to bully Custodes players because they're terrible. No. I don't think anything can even hurt a Custodes player's feelings at this point. They're just
no, exactly. They're too busy saying they have transhuman on their feelings. You can only wound them emotionally.
You can only wound them on fives, actually. Jeremy, you had something to say. You can say it, Jeremy.
Should I?
Probably not. So you should do it anyway.
You should say it anyway.
I probably shouldn't. So I'm just gonna.
Sorry, you can put it in our chat afterwards, and I'll say on the show.
Everybody, be nice to the other people in your community. If you see somebody reacting poorly to things that you say to them about their factions, you should stop. There you go. And don't just be a jerk to new people when they pick a faction. If somebody says I'm new to 40k and I like Tau or I like Elves or I like Custodes, don't be mean to them about it.
You can encourage them to play melee Tau. It's okay. You can gaslight them into thinking that's strong.
Alex Tau says, nah, you can hurt Custodes players' feelings now if you have high strength and full rerolls because they can't pop transhuman and auspice at the same time. Fair.
I will toss mine out here just because I wanted to make sure I got it correct. And this is more of a hilarious interaction that happened on another server. Name yourself Valdor on Discord, and you will find the goddamn spam bots. And you will find the true Custodes fans who believe that Valdor is the hero of the Imperium and that it besmirches his name, that some mere mortal should go by his name.
Okay, Custodes players, this is why people make fun of you.
And yes, Brian, blocking tactics was hilarious.
Brian, you can come to the Tempest War RTT with us and play blocking tactics.
Do we have that was the fun that was the most fun towel list that I played against though when I was playing as Harlequins. Getting charged by crisis suits to take an objective was the funniest thing that ever happened to me in my whole life because it worked, but it was also terrifying because that was not how I expected Tau to play at all.
All right, I think that'll do it for us for the week.
I think so. I don't see any other questions. If anybody wants to sneak in a question in the next 30 seconds, we'll answer it, but that's about it.
Nobody should ever, under any circumstances, play White Scars in 9th edition. It's not good, guys.
Nobody wants to play
I need you all to know that was so stressful for no goddamn reason.
They're the swollest Harlequins, though. They have all the same rules.
It was more like playing Orcs, but with none of the fallback mechanics.
Oh no!
I don't know if have you read the White Scar supplement? There aren't stratagems. You just show up and you're like, cool. So I'm going to use the Space Marine ones. Cool.
That sounds about right. To be fair,
it's genuinely the most impressive I've ever been with having a double move stratagem that I never used.
Did you take like Plume and some other stuff? Did you take any other relics?
You can't take any of them because you have Gulliman as your warlord.
Fair.
So he locks you out of it all. So you're just like, cool. Don't get any cool stuff.
Charlie K asks a question that I think we've talked about a little bit, which is, are we going to enter a vehicle and monster meta with changes to terrain and toughness? And some people arguably say we're in a vehicle and monster meta right now.
We kind of are. Let's wait and see what the points look like because, as always, that's the only thing that ever matters.
Points, full army rolls.
-1 to wound on a Wraith Knight seems kind of amusing. I won't lie.
It'd be funnier on a Phantom.
It's true. You want to wound it on 6s all the time. That's fun.
No. On a Revenant.
Ooh, never wounding on anything.
Brian's got one of those too.
Is that one under 2,000 points so you can field it at a tournament?
It's like 750 points.
So that's what I'm seeing is just some people bringing some 3 Farseers and 3 Titans and just seeing how it goes.
Brian, all I'm saying is a Revenant is currently 1,500 and you do own one.
No, 3 Farseers and 1 Revenant. There you go.
-3 to wound. This will work, right?
Definitely do something.
I'm sure that GW didn't think about capping minuses to wound, right?
Yeah, you can actually never wound it.
No, because we know the critical wounds still exist.
That's true.
You were smiling so much as you burned people's deployment zones into your personal vacation home.
That is the true happiness.
It was quite funny.
That is the true happiness of playing a fast army is deployment zones don't matter because you're just in them all the time.
It was when poor Simon killed one of my Vanguard veterans, so I charged his Farseer 35 inches away with those same Vanguard veterans. It was like, I'm going to advance, roll the 4. Guess I'm going 20 inches that way, regen at the front, +3 to charge.
Aww.
This is my favorite, though. Imagine the internet screech of Custodies go to weapon skill, ballistic skill 3 in the faction focus because they get +1 to hit somewhere else in their book.
They get +1 to hit if they're in the right kata, which is based on what orientation your units are in. Like if they're in the triangle formation or a line formation, they're doing a dance.
They're going to put them on square bases so they fit into old-timey phalanxes.
Yeah. Are you in lance formation or are you in a line or are you in horizontal line, vertical line? Custodies units have facings because they're all dancing about the board, doing their katas.
We don't want to talk anymore about Custodies players and their thoughts about things. We're just going to keep moving forward. Let's close up shop, Innes.
There was plugs earlier. Go and listen to them again if you're done. Nathan's going to say bye-bye now like this. Bye-bye. See you later.
Bye-bye.